I summon all my imps. Hey everybody, it's Annabelle. So basically I was going through some of the cards and some of the actions that I had in some of my past games. And the card that I basically wanted to talk about today was Mobius and Mobius, or Triple M. And how the game doesn't represent what certain cards do well enough. And let me explain exactly what's going on. So if you're looking at Mobius and Mobius, the way the card is actually written, it says your cards can't be increased, your opponent's cards can't be reduced. And if you were to actually go by this strict definition, then I'd have to say the word increase or reduce on it. This card technically does not work anywhere in Marvel Snap. And what makes this interesting is, as more cards come out in the future, what things are we used to having that won't work anymore because of a card? And how important is it to make cards readable at a glance? So let's start from the top with some of the ones that make sense. And remember, just quickly, it says that can't be increased or reduced. So we're looking for the word increased or reduced. If you look at Zabu, because one of the things he's supposed to counter on it, Zabu reads your 4 cards cost 1 less. It doesn't say reduced. Now, if you wanted to change how this was phrased, you could actually put reduce your 4 cards 1 less, minimum 1. So you still understand that, it's reducing the cost of it. And what kind of gets weird is that some of the cards that it affects are cards that you wouldn't think. Like, it affects Swarm. If you actually read Swarm, it says, when this card is discarded from your hand, add 2 copies that cost 0 to your hand. So the 2 copies that are added to your hand should be 0 cost. So all the stuff that says, change it to this number, change it to that number, doesn't work with Mobius and Mobius. And if you don't understand that that's how it works, you might be caught on this. And there's ways that you could change this even too. Like, you could change Swarm to say, when discarded from your hand, add 2 copies, reduce to 0 to your hand. And the one that really bugs me about this, believe it or not, is Death. Death, basically, if your opponent plays Mobius on Mobius, you're never playing Death unless you can turn off the Mobius. It really hurts and really handicaps the Death archetype, having one card that basically says you're never seeing play. Now, every single card in the game can have a way of rephrasing it that currently works with Mobius so that it said the word increase or reduce. Except for one. And the one that basically I couldn't find a good way to rephrase it was, believe it or not, Mr. Negative. Where it just says swap the power and cost of all cards in your deck. And now, if you saw this in a regular game and you saw Mobius and Mobius out on the board, would you automatically understand that this is hurting your Mobius, your Mr. Negative deck? That if you see Mobius out, you shouldn't play Mr. Negative at all. And that's the thing. It's like, if you made things more clear that they were increasing and reducing. Then cards like Mr. Negative could be an outlier. Where Mr. Negative, like, yeah, he's not increasing or reducing anything. He's just swapping them left. He's just swapping them around. So now your 5 zeros, your 0 5, but that's not increasing or reducing it. It just swapped them. And I think that would make the game more interesting, more complex down the road, where it's like, oh yeah, this card works because it says reduce. This card says that it swaps, so it doesn't, or it says, but just for example, if Wave had come out, the Wave basically says set cards to 4 until next turn. All cards cost 4 until the end of next turn. And Second Dinner had a chance, even at the point when this came out, to say that, no, Wave beats Mobius. Because it's just sets it. It says everything's 4 next turn regardless. That's end stop full sentence. And that's the problem with cards that exist. And you could say, oh, some of these cards are really old, like Wave's old and stuff like that. But even cards that just recently came out are still having this problem. If you look at Ravonna Renslayer came out legitimately a week before Triple M. So they already knew that they were going to bring out Triple M. And even Ravonna says, your cards with 1 or less power cost 1 less. Doesn't say reduce, doesn't say increase. Just says it does. So there's a way you can rewrite this to say reduce your cards with 1 or less power, 1 less, minimum 1. That says the same thing that Ravonna says, and is a lot clearer to a player that it's reducing that card. The problem that you get into this is it's like, you'll have certain cards where you're like, oh, this should work. Because your phrasing on cards is not consistent. And Second Dinner's been a little bit better at phrasing cards in the past. I just think it's more important now to determine what cards should work with certain cards and what cards shouldn't work with certain cards. And if they do, make it clear that they work. Maybe there's even some way, and I know this is a weird thing to do, where once I saw Mobius just in this thing, in a game, even though it's grayed out for me, I could click something on here where it would tell me, click on the actual card, or click on something here even in the actual space on the PC version, where it told me all the cards that it interacted with. Like, it could say, okay, interacts with Wave, interacts with Beast, interacts with She-Hulk. So I could look at this card and be like, oh, that's why I had an issue with it. Now, does this have to happen with every card? No. But some of the cards, especially with some that are more complicated like that, you need to know what you can play, what you can't play. And this isn't just for Mobius and Mobius, there's some other cards. Like, for example, Shauna the She-Devil. Add a random 1 cost card to each location. Are those played or are those summoned? Because as everybody who's been using Shauna with Bloodstone realizes those aren't played, they're summoned. And again, play a random 1 cost card at each location. Summon a random 1 cost card at each location means that you understand more how this card works. But if you look at other stuff in here, like Mysterio, it legitimately says play. It's one of the few cards that actually says play. There's some other ones that say when a card is played at this location, or when you don't play a card at this location, but that's the only one that says that the minions are actually played. Like with Ultron, would it be so much hard to say summon instead of create? Summon shows what you're doing. Create, you could say it's the same thing as summon, but there's a lot of wiggle room on create. Making these small changes may not seem like a lot, but when you're a newer player or when you haven't been playing for a long time, you need to know what every card does. Because it should be common knowledge that if you read a card, it explains a card. And right now, certain cards just aren't doing that. Anyways, I want to thank you all so much for watching. And as always, remember, play a bowl of fun.